The good old clap, take one.
That's right.
How many of you knew what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old? I did. I wanted to be world champion.
Hey, is there honesty involved in this podcast? Can we be honest?
You can shut your fucking lips.
And then I'll just say, put them up once, let's go.
He's like, you look too pretty on the wave. Get ugly.
We can talk about DMT if you want.
I thought we were boxing.
All right, well, this is a thrill. We have the state of Victoria's favorite son, a former Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach wildcard and finalist. I think you're a Scottish lord. We'll get to that in a bit. But also the current Surfing Victoria CEO, Adam Robertson, on the lineup today. Adam, thanks so much for joining us.
No worries, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Right on. So first things first, where are you today? How are you doing? Who are you hanging out with?
Well, I'm still in Torquay. I'm the CEO of Surfing Victoria. So we're actually running the operational duties of the Rip Curl Pro. So we're setting up the site at the moment, and I pretty much just hang with my family, my wife and my two kids. I have a son, Teddy, who's 8, and my daughter, Violet, who's 5.
Oh, beautiful. And in all of that, with the family duties and getting ready and everything set up for the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach, do you get an opportunity to surf on days like this, even if the waves aren't that great?
Yeah, look, I surf all the time with my son, Teddy, and yeah, trying to get my daughter, Violet, going, which is great. Love it. And yeah, I never thought I'd surf a softboard, my softboard, the most out of all the boards in my quiver. But yeah, that's the one I'm kind of just paddling around on and helping my kids get some waves, which is awesome.
That's very cool. That's very cool. As you mentioned, we're recording this on Tuesday, April 5th in the States anyway. It's April 6th where you're at. And this is going to air on April 12th, which is April 13th at Bells, which is well within the window for the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach, meaning that it's possible that by the time people are listening to this, we've already started competition. You being sort of the maybe the ultimate local there in a lot of ways. What are you thinking in terms of the forecast and the likelihood of running by the time our conversation airs next week?
Looking at the forecast, I think we'll probably be, maybe the day this goes out might be the first day we're running, round 1. The forecast at the moment isn't probably what I would see as traditional bells with the line stacked up to the horizon and rolling down Bells Bowl. But I think from what I'm seeing, we'll be able to use Winky Pup a little bit, more from mid-tide to mid-tide through the low. But yeah, hoping for some fun waves for sure.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to have traveled there for a lot of years and experienced that event and that region. And as you said, it might not be a forecast where there's classic lines stacked to the horizon, but it does seem like one of those venues that's almost inoculated from conditions in a way where you see actually quite a high level of enthusiasm from the competitors, agnostic of the conditions, if it's challenging, if it's up at Rincon, et cetera, et cetera. And since you are one of those people that spent the bulk of your life in the region and perhaps, understand that wave and its many moods better than anyone else, for our listeners who have never, ever been there, how would you describe just the waves, and if you could list them too, at Bells Beach? How would you describe those to some of the listeners that have never even been there?
Yeah, sure. So I guess probably the wave that everyone wants to surf is the Bells Bowl. Typically a low tide wave, best from, head high to, bigger. I've never sort of seen it close out. It can hold up to 10 or 12, 15-foot surf, as we saw in 81, with Simon testing his 3-pin thruster. So that's probably, Bells Bowl is probably the most famous wave in the little Bells Reserve there. It's a down the line wave. It's got a lot of slope. It's not radically steep, but it does move down the reef quite quickly. And it's a really great wave for the really good technical surfers, open face surfers, using their long calves and and using the entire big wave face. You see over time the best, big open face surfers have typically gone well at Bells, from Simon to Lisa Anderson to Tom Curran, Mick, Joel, Kelly, Matt Hoy, Lane, Steph. So those surfers have typically got that really nice power base. The Bells Bowl suits that style of surfing very much so. Rincon is a break that sort of breaks maybe 150 metres to the right of Bells Bowl in the same bay. It just sort of breaks up against the cliff. It's a high tide wave. You typically want to surf it 2 hours before high tide, and it's a super fun little right-hander, sort of historically known as a Goofy's graveyard, but it is when it's good, it's a super fun wave. It kind of reminds me of maybe small trestles or something, where you get an opportunity to do 6 or 7 turns and you can kind of tee off. And I think on the lower end of the tide, when Rincon's not that great, it's a really tricky wave to surf. But when it's high tide, when it's lined up, it's a super fun wave. And then the other one is Winky Pop. Winky Pop is maybe 300 metres to the left of Bells Beach, just a slightly different bay that sort of rolls down towards Jan Juc and Torquay. That is probably a more consistent break than Bells. Bells is consistent, but Winky sort of doesn't need as much swell, and typically maybe more waves break at Winky Pop. Typically a low tide wave, but still pretty good fun on most tides. And Winky Pop is probably a little similar to surfing Jeffreys Bay, in that you have the sun's in your eyes in the morning. It's a really fast down the line wave, similar turns where you're keeping your speed moving down the wave, easy to get stuck behind. And Winky Pop's a fantastic, maybe a little more high performance wave than Bells. Those are the 3 sort of main breaks in the lineup that you surf, from high tide to a medium swell, to Bells Bowl on the low tide with a bit of swell.
Expert level breakdown. Of those surfers that you named, I'm wondering, I'd imagine you've been paying a little bit of attention, at least, to the Championship Tour class of 2022. Are there any men or women in that class that you've seen that you're predicting to do well at this year's event at Bells Beach?
Look, one surfer that I hadn't seen a whole lot of, but when I saw him surf Bells and I saw him surf Winky Pop, I was like, whoa, this kid's really, really good, was Callum Robson. I'd never seen him surf before. I'd never even I hadn't heard much about him. But when I saw him surf, he'd never been to Bells before. And when I saw him surf, he just fit into the wave straight away. His turn selection, the way that where he was turning on the waves, and the type of maneuvers he was doing, I was just going, well, he's like, it's like he's been here 20 times, So I didn't expect that, more so because I hadn't seen him surf before. And obviously the other one on the women's side of the draw is India. She's grown up in Jan Juc and knows the area, knows the region, and her style of surfing, she's got a lot of back foot power. I think that's historically, as we as I said earlier, that's something that really suits Bells and the waves here, Bells, Winky and Rincon. So she's one that, I obviously want her to go well, but also her surfing fits the wave really well. And I also think her surfing is very on point with where the judging is at on the women's scale at the moment. I just feel like they're they're loving the surfers who are breaking the line and using that back foot jam to really do those radical direction changes. So, Callum and India, they were two that India didn't surprise me, but as I said, Callum really did.
Yeah, no, I think these are great picks. Of those waves, Rincon, the Bowl, and Winky Pop, for you personally, at the height of your competitive career, did you have a preference in terms of which one you competed at?
No. Look, probably my thoughts were, I actually didn't want it to be that good. I love surfing great waves. That was probably where I was most comfortable in a heat jersey. But what happened when it was tricky or when it wasn't that good was that local knowledge came into play more. So the little things that you knew about the break, you were able to use them to your advantage or against your competitors, So, Bells in 2009, the surf was really good. So that was great, but I did enjoy it when it was mid-tide or, it was tricky. Probably of the three waves, I do love surfing Bells Bowl. That's probably the wave that I enjoy surfing the most. So that was kind of where I always wanted to be able to surf in a heat.
Interesting. And would you say it was the same for you free surfing as well? Because you're having me down there a lot and then listen to surfers that are from there and also surfers that are traveling there too. A lot of them kind of have their preferences outside of a jersey too. And I'm curious, even to this day, if the Bowl is still, if it's sort of equitable between Winky Pop and the Bowl, are you still going with Bell's Bowl or do you want to go out at Winky Pop instead?
Yeah, it all probably depends. I'd normally go out there with an open mind and have a look at how many people are surfing both breaks and then make a choice. But lots of people love Winky Pop, and that's probably their preference to surf because it's more high performance. Maybe it's maybe a bit more room, a bit more space to surf with a crowd. Right. So yeah, like I don't really have a preference. I just kind of try and gauge the crowd. But as I sort of said, I think like I can see why a lot of the surfers love Winky Pop because it is maybe a few more opportunities and you can sort of maybe light it up a little more. It might let you do a few more innovative style maneuvers, whereas sometimes Bells is a little bit like Sunset where the wave kind of dictates what you do a little bit more. So, which was great for me because I have a small maneuver repertoire, but maybe some of the guys like Idolo and Gabby and Philippe and John and those guys with that huge maneuver repertoire, they might sort of enjoy getting to use them all at Winky a bit more.
I don't know. I one of the benefits of doing this podcast is I can argue that part of my work is going back and watching old highlight clips of the people I'm talking to. And I spent a good portion of my day watching your highlight clips from not too long ago. And I'd say that your repertoire was pretty diverse, much more diverse than I think people give you credit for. But you mentioned your current role as CEO of Surfing Victoria. Surfing, as a sport in Australia is certainly taken very, very seriously relative to other parts of the world. And the, state-based surfing organizations, Surfing Victoria, Surfing New South Wales, et cetera, are very, very unique. But I don't think a lot of our listeners sort of understand what those are necessarily if they're not from there. Could you describe what Surfing Victoria is, what your experience with the organization has been, and how long you've been in the CEO role, and what that actually is for you as a profession?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of our programs are government funded programs. We run we run everything from operational side of Rip Curl Pro. We run all of our state titles, state-based events, similar to maybe the NSSAs in America. where we're deciding state champions through all codes, from stand-up paddleboarding, kneeboarding, surfing, longboarding, shortboarding. We also run a really big women's program, trying to get more women involved in the sport and promote equality in the lineup, which is a great program. We have a Surfers Rescue 24/7 program, which is a program that we aim to teach surfers how to perform CPR and use their surfboard in a rescue type scenario. We run a really big indigenous surfing program, a 23-year-long indigenous surfing program, where we go to communities, indigenous communities, and promote water safety, surfing, stand-up paddleboarding if we go inland. And that particular program is probably one of the most rewarding programs that I've had the pleasure of being able to see evolve and continue. So yeah, look, we're very diverse in the things that we try and promote, and try and I suppose promotes surfing from the elite to the grassroots, through, as I said, through the I suppose grassroots programs, all the way through to state titles, Rip Curl Pro trials, and helping deliver the Rip Curl Pro. So there's a lot to it, but look, my experience coming from a professional surfing background where you don't have a whole lot of rules or barriers in terms of a 9 to 5 or those types of things. My experience with Surfing Victoria has been really good. I've loved working here. I've loved working with the people that I get to work with. I love that the staff and the way that we work it's not it's more around promoting how good surfing is and how we can bring that to people from all I suppose aspects of life, and yeah, it's been great. I've been CEO going on 6 years. I would say when I first got the job, I was very green. I would probably say, looking back, I was in a bit over my head. But again, really lucky to have some of the long-term staff here that were able to kind of help a lot. And the board, the Surfing Victoria board, helped me a lot to kind of grow and evolve into the role. And now, as I said, I'm sort of 6 years in, and still learning, still evolving, and trying to, just trying to be the best I can be with, promoting Surfing Vic and the sport.
That sounds incredible. And of all the, initiatives and programs that you listed off there, I'd imagine too that someone with your deep background, and we are going to get to that in the next segment, but, development of young talent, to the elite level is something that I'd imagine not only interests you, but hugely benefits that community as well, just given your background. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, look, I mean, the high performance side of it and having the ability to coach up and coming surfers is a huge passion of mine. I love it. I love getting the chance to, see and work with the kids who are kind of, you're seeing them break these performance barriers that they've never had the chance to do before, or those types of things. I work really closely with Caleb Warren in at Surfing Vic, and we created a surf coaching website called Surf Better Now to help a lot of the kids that we were working with, in particular through remote regions of Victoria, trying to give them more access to some, I suppose, coaching that we couldn't be on the beach, in Malakuta, which is sort of eight hours drive away, or those types of things. We're trying to, just trying to give the best opportunities for Victorian surfers as we possibly could, and still do. Look, the high performance side of the business is look, I feel like it's one that we should be pushing. We run events and we have lots of kids who have these dreams and see Rip Curl Pro and they want to be professional surfers. I just feel like it's a real important part of what we do is to try and help them have an opportunity to reach those levels. And that's sort of why we're so passionate about the high performance space.
This next question, I'm sure, is going to elicit an eye roll from you because I'm sure it's something you talk about every day. But I never get to talk. I rarely get to talk to people from Victoria, so I'm gonna ask.
Shoot.
So, and heat check me on this too, because I might get some of my details wrong. But my understanding, 2 of the big 3 surf companies, born and bred in Torquay, in Rip Curl and Quicksilver. You've got world-class waves. You've got an abundance of year-round swell, not just on the surf coast, but the Mornington Peninsula, Phillip Island, etc. And yet, outside of a few, Wayne Lynch, Gary Taylor, Troy Brooks, Glendon Ringross, yourself, Nick Musgroff, Jack Perry, I think
Tony Ray
traveled on the. Thank you very much, and Nikki Van Dyke and now India Robinson, as you mentioned.
Yep.
It's still kind of a small amount of elite level surfers that have come out of a region where it does seem like there'd be plenty of sponsorship support. Obviously, there's great waves and the surfing is incredible. What is your theory on that?
Look, I think it's probably there might be something to do with that it's cold. There might be something to this. There's heaps of lots of people sort of move into your other your sports with the footies and those types of things. So I think maybe in the past maybe it wasn't maybe seen as attainable it was as what it might have been over or might be in the next few years, and that's that's been a huge. I sit here and I understand that there hasn't been a whole lot of Victorian surfers continue on through to the the elite ranks, but I'm pretty hopeful with some of the talent coming through that they have they have the skills to follow India and Nick and Troy and some of Victoria's best surfers and pursue that professional career into the elite ranks. And some of the surfers coming through, Willis Droomer, Ellie Harrison, Xavier Huxtable, Will Watson, there's a bunch of kids coming through that I'm really excited about. And I'm hoping that they've got the drive to cut through and cut into the elite ranks over the next few years.
I love it. And it kind of gets to another question, which is one that comes up on this podcast quite a lot. And, in America, and we have this conversation a lot outside of the podcast, and it's one of those things where if you're a young talent over the last probably 5 to 10 years, there's been this migration of young talent from all over the country to basically San Clemente. They're like, we're going here, we're going to surf lower trestles every day, blah, 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 which I understand from the standpoint of like, it's a consistent wave and there's elite level competition there and that's iron sharpens iron, that whole thing. And I've talked to a lot of Australians where it's a version of that has happened too with the Gold Coast. Have you noticed that much with surfers from Victoria? Because, in my experience, some of those people that we talked about, whether it was yourself or Jack Perry, the fact that the fact that you guys were born and bred in those waves in Victoria not only gave you this really beautifully unique approach to surfing the waves there, but also when you'd go on tour and it was this awesome point of difference. And one thing that I'm kind of a little against in a way, just aesthetically, is kind of this homogenization of surfing. If everyone's going to the same spot and surfing the same wave, it's like you kind of lose points of difference in terms of style and approach. And I'm wondering if that's something that you've noticed in Victoria since you've taken over as CEO of Surfing Vic.
Yeah, we've definitely seen surfers move up to the Goldie and those things. Look, I think probably Mick, Joel, and Dean and Damon Harvey, and there was a huge push coming from the Gold Coast, Steph and a number of surfers in that region really driving Australian surfing, and that probably the consistency of the Superbank and those types of things really elevated Australian surfing for a long period of time. Look, I don't know what the right or the wrong way is. I see why people do that, and I see why people go to trestles and those types of things, because the exposure to brilliant surfing is so valuable for for an emerging surfer. And I imagine if you were to turn up at trestles, you might, on any one day, you see the Colapintos, the Gadauskases, Kelly might come down for a surf just before dark, and Philippe might be out there, and you get exposed to these surfers that they're doing phenomenal things, and the kids see that at an early age and think, oh, I can try that or do that, and they get largely inspired from a really young age. So I see the value in that, but I also see the value in the individuality that you're talking about, and surfers like myself and Nick, and there's surfers who have grow up on different waves, so there's different strengths in their surfing, and I think ultimately there is no formula to where you go. I think it's in the athlete or in the emerging kids. If they've got the drive and they've got the passion, they'll make it. Taj was probably a great example of that. Even Adrian Buchan and those kids are from Avoca. So they were, whilst Taj is, from Yallingup, and whilst Adrian from Avoca, they're remote areas, they were sort of a hotbed of talent, but still, there would have been a lot of time surfing with not many people and not seeing, that elite talent in the lineup whenever they were in the surf. So, as I said, going probably back to your question, you see lots of people sort of hunting the hot spots, and I think ultimately the driven kids will rise to the top, and hopefully now we're out of COVID, the world is getting smaller again, and for me, a trip to the Gold Coast with my family is much easier than it was 18 months ago. And even probably as when I was growing up, a trip to the Gold Coast seemed like it was so far away.
Right.
I don't think I even surfed Duranbar Beach until I was 15 or 16, So, everywhere's a lot more accessible. I just, at this point, I don't know the answer on whether the value is to move there or not. Yeah, it's a hard one.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Duranbar Beach is probably it's a podcast favorite. I'll put it out there. Every time it comes up, I get excited. We're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into just who Adam Robertson is. We'll be right back. So, Adam, you mentioned that you're in Torquay today, but you were not born and raised there. Is that right? You came from, is it Cape Bridgewater, Portland area?
Yep. So that's about 350 kilometres west of Torquay. So I guess most of probably the viewers understand the events historically. Rip Curl Pro's historically gone to Joanna. Joanna is what I would say halfway home. Oh. About 3.5 hours drive from Torquay. I grew up. I moved to. I spent a lot of time in Torquay. A lot of my family are from Torquay. I spent every school holidays in Torquay throughout my growing up. I finished school in Portland, Portland Secondary College, and I still love going back there. It's sort of what I would still class as my home, and I still feel the most comfortable there. with a lot of my friends growing up still live there and have families there and things like that. So yeah, I still love when I get the chance to go back there. But yeah, I'm in Torquay most of the time now. I think I moved to Torquay when I was maybe 24, something like that. So it's quite a while ago.
Yeah, right. So what was life like growing up in Cape Bridgewater? Are we talking like 70s, 80s, 90s? What, mom and dad, brothers, sisters? What was the setup like for you there?
I was born in 82. So we lived at Cape Bridgewater, which is a beautiful beach. It's probably a little bit like Newquay. It sort of just breaks all over the place, but it's a fun beach break. I could just walk down the street and surf there a lot. And there's a lot of sort of similar to all the Victorian coastline. There was lots of surf, and my dad was a great surfer. He's a great surfer, and I spent a lot of my time surfing with him and a couple other friends. I was probably the youngest surfer in the town for quite a long time, and yeah, it was great. I just spent the whole time surfing with my dad. And then I remember, probably when I turned 18 and I'd finished school, people sort of say, oh, was it crowded? Those types of things down there. I think I probably would have spent about 60% of my surfing on my own, which I look back at, I think that's a bit weird. Because now with kids and stuff, I don't necessarily like surfing by myself a whole lot. But back then, I just loved it. I loved surfing by myself and chasing waves and finding them and scoring, and it's unreal.
What's the difference now that you have kids? Is it just you'd rather be surfing with them, or are you worried you might get hurt? What's the change in psychology?
Yeah,
there?
I guess you just kind of, your kids and your family are in the back of your mind more now, whereas back then I was just wanting to find good waves. but now definitely I'm at a place where I just love surfing with my kids and want to do that, and then eventually we'll go and surf all the waves that I love surfing. We'll do it together.
You mentioned how the world's gotten so much smaller in recent years, certainly since the information age has hit. But, back then, for you to be exposed to world-class surfing and for you yourself to develop into a world-class surfer must have been challenging, right? Because even though I'm sure you had access to great waves, like not having that proof of concept in front of you and not having that accessibility to it, do you think about that at all, and do you reflect on how you're able to develop almost in a vacuum there, and in a way that developed to the elite levels in a lot of ways?
Yeah, look, probably my only exposure to elite level surfing was watching surf movies. I watched, and the only real exposure that I had to elite, where I got to see elite surfers in the flesh, was through Rip Curl Pro. I can remember so many Rip Curl Pros, from Richie Collins winning, sitting on the beach, to Kelly winning his first bell, where the bell fell off the bell. So that, Rip Curl Pro was probably one that was the only opportunity for me to see that top end surfing in the flesh, and the rest was just surf movies. Search 1, Search 2, Searching for Tom Curran, Pump, and all the Sarge's movies. Like, that was probably like those, and then as I got older, it went into all the other Momentum Generation, things like that. But as a kid, like, I remember, Search 2 and Pump were like on repeat, and the Green Iguana just over and over.
Were there other interests for you when you were growing up, other sports, other pastimes, or sort of things that you're interested in? Or was it you sort of just found your niche with surfing and stuck with it from a young age?
Yeah, look, I mean, as I said, like, my dad was a hardcore surfer, so I was, into it pretty young. I loved skateboarding. We had a skateboard ramp in the backyard, which I think was pretty innovative at the time. And I loved AFL football as well. I played that for a while until I sort of got to be maybe like 14 or something. Then Dad just sort of said, "Nah, mate, we're going surfing," which was at the time I remember being like, "Oh, you know, I kind of just moved into high school and I wanted to sort of play with my friends at footy," but then it was pretty quick to realise that it was a great decision to not play footy anymore and just hunt waves with Dad and a couple of our other mates, which was awesome childhood.
And competitive surfing, was that something you did from a young age? Was it something that you were attracted to from going and seeing the Rip Curl Pro at Bell's? And I guess my follow-up question to that is, when did the self-awareness start to creep in that you might actually be really, really good at this and you want to make it a profession?
For me, look, I didn't do, and I would have done maybe one comp a year till I was about 14 or 15. Like I was so far away that I wasn't probably maybe sure what to do or like how to do it or how I was going to get there or those types of things. And I remember kind of dipping my toes in maybe when I was in year 8. I think that was like, I think I turned 14 in year 8 in high school and then I almost maybe made the state team. And then I remember that was when I after that year, my dad sort of contacted Simon Anderson because my family, we've known Simon for a long, long time since I was born. And Dad, that was when Kelly got a Magic Simon through the mid-90s, maybe 96. And I got a Simon Anderson, and then that was the first board. Then, yeah, I think that was the board that kind of opened the door to me improving my surfing really quickly. And then I don't think I probably wanted to be a pro surfer through my childhood, but I probably don't, underneath it all, I wasn't really sure how to do it.
It changes so much year to year, right? And like, yeah. And even now, like we're kind of working through this, stabilize our new 3-tier system and actually create, again, like stabilization for young surfers and the people that support them, whether they're families or sponsors, to kind of go like, oh, that's the roadmap. But as you pointed out, I mean, I've been, it's my 17th year at the company. Even when I started, it's so different to what it is today. And certainly through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it was just constantly changing. So as you said, it's like, well, I don't know how to do this. Even if I wanted to do it, it's there's no kind of like road for me to follow. Yeah, that's right. Like it was, in particular, just sort of being from a town where no one was doing the same thing or no one wanted to do the same thing that I wanted to do. It was very foreign for my friends or, maybe parents. It was hard to maybe ask what to do, but I remember in year 11, I made the Australian team to go to the equivalent, I guess, the ISA World Juniors. And I made the semis at that event. And that was probably, I got to spend time with like Bede and Jay Thompson and Adrian Buchan and like the team of really good surfers. And I never thought I was as good as those guys, like Sean Cansdell, Dan Ross. I never thought I was as good as those guys, but probably it gave me a glimpse of maybe how good I needed to be. So I'd sort of go home and be quite driven to try and improve and those types of things. Being from a relatively remote part of the coastline, as we've been talking about, and after getting exposed to that Australian junior team and going back and working on parts of your surfing, what parts of your surfing did you specifically work on at that time? But also, did you realize that you kind of had some advantages or some strengths in your own surfing, or at least in your ability to develop those parts of your surfing, just being from that part of the coastline? Yeah, look, I suppose probably
to answer your question on what I thought I wanted to work on, honestly, I didn't really know. I actually just worked on getting really fit more so than like, you know, any specific carve or anything like that for a long period of time. I went and did some stuff with Martin Dunn as well as a kid, and he was great. He was really great to me and really helpful. And probably the one thing that I love in that coming from the remote area was that, you know, you might watch, you know, Sabotage like 20 times with your mates, and you'd go for a surf and you would catch a wave in every set, you know, so you might get the chance to try the move that you saw Taj doing or whatever. You would get the chance to try it over and over and heaps of times because you know, there wasn't a whole lot of surfers out, so you'd get heaps of chances to try it, or you'd catch every set wave, or, you know, whatever. So that was a real advantage of, you know, coming from that remote, those remote areas, is that, you know, sometimes maybe at Snapper you might paddle for an hour and get one or two good ones, you know, whereas at you know, in the remote locations, you're on a wave every couple of minutes or every set.
Okay, so we're watching a lot of Sabotage. We're getting hyper fit. We have this whole coastline that is essentially a playground for training. Walk me through the steps over the next couple of years in terms of your career as a professional surfer. Were there sponsorship deals that pushed you into the next level? Were there competitive results? Did you start traveling internationally? How did the idea of being a professional surfer when you were on that Australian junior national team sort of manifest into being a touring qualifying surfer?
Yeah, I guess, look, it was just about kind of asking questions. You know, like at the time, like Troy Brooks was doing the QS, things like that. So you could kind of ask him or ask Lyndon sort of what to do. So in Australia at the time, we had a really strong Billabong Pro Junior Series, or a Pro Junior Series. And that had lots of the guys that went on to do really well on that tour. So it was a really strong junior series. And that was sort of the first taste that I had of, like, I suppose, going around to other events or following, I suppose, a junior tour in Australia. And then off the back of that, it was sort of at the time where you could just enter QSs, you know, like you didn't need a rating, you know, like, so like you'd go to the Margaret River Masters and you'd start in the round of 224 or 250 or whatever, and you could just kind of surf your way through and like accumulate points through those, you know, like, so at the time, you know, we'd go to Margaret's, you'd go to Newey, and you'd start in the round at, you know, 250 or whatever. And
surfing against Mr. Cliff and whoever's out there.
Yeah, like, you know, and that was kind of and then in the end, like, we ended up going to Europe. And then, you know, I just kind of, like, I think it was 2003 or 2, it was 2002 or 3. Like, I think I went, you know, from like 200th on the ratings or something to like 60th or 70th or something. So then I made the final at the Newquay Board Masters, and I made a bunch of, at the time, like, remember, like, at the time you'd make the round of 64, and that was like where the guys on the top 44, they'd start in that round. So I made a bunch of the main round of the QS, and then it's just sort of ended up giving me enough points to sort of keep trying.
It is so, I mean, I like how you bring that up, where it's like, you know, when you started, and even when I started, which, you know, at the ASP, not competing, but working at the events, it's 05, 06, I remember going to QSs all over North America, and they're just being like, "No, there's 3 people in this heat because we didn't have enough people." You know, it was
just go.
There's so much opportunity compared to now, where it's like, it's not that there's not a lot of events. There are a lot of events, but there's just so many surfers that are trying to get in. And I think that's one of the things from a design standpoint that we need to work on, is just ensuring that new regional qualifying series has a big enough kind of door for everyone that wants to come in can get in, because otherwise you're just kind of, you know, twiddling your thumbs being like, I can't get into these events.
Yeah, that's right. Like, I think, you know, and I'd probably also, I look back and, you know, some of the highlights of my life were, you know, you'd go from Australia, you'd go to Durban, you'd stay in South Africa for a month because you'd go down to JB or something. You'd go from JB, you'd go over to the US Open. US Open, you might go to England and then do the Europe leg. And those, you know, sometimes I think, like some of the kids coming through there, that was some of the best times. You know, I think back, and they were just such awesome times, you know, for lots of people you meet. You know, you met so many great friends and those types of things, aside from doing the events. I don't know. Like, I don't know how to improve it, because at the time it was much easier to get sponsorship and those types of things. So the idea of having enough money to travel the world was maybe in a way a little more attainable than some of the, you know, like at the moment you see Cal Robson, India Robinson, they don't have major sponsors in there. India's number 7 or 8 in the world right now.
Yeah. And,
you know, I'm sure like there's more surfers on tour who are struggling for sponsorship. But it's a tough gig to try and, I suppose, save that money to go and do the tour. So that's where the positives of that, you know, then it's like the Australian leg, and then they qualify for the Challenger Series. I guess it's that maybe way where they can get into the events and then maybe keep going if they're going all right.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think it's a way of, I like to think of it as a way of like resetting the board in a way that makes sense from a pacing standpoint and a financial standpoint, but also, you know, the industry, it's such an interesting thing because for so long, even when I started, the sport was a mechanism of the industry. It was, you know, it was ran by the surfers and the endemic industry. And in a way, it was a framework for the industry to kind of operate around where to put its money, which surfers to place bets on, et cetera, et cetera. And because we've had a bunch of years of sort of, and especially the last couple of years of disruption, I think resetting the board in this way allows the industry to look at it and say, great, I understand how I take this kid from here to there, and it's going to be there every year, and I have the confidence to invest in that person. But you know, going back to your qualifying series campaign, it is one thing to be able to travel the world for sure, especially as a young person, but you know, that there's a ton of pressure on people too, and being away from home, and you know, not everyone is cut out for that. You have to be a fairly well put together person to be able to deal with it psychologically. It sounds like you loved it. And I'm wondering if you've ever given any thought to what you attribute that mentality to, if it was just good upbringing, you just felt comfortable being away from home, you didn't worry too much about you know, substance abuse or anything like that, because you know, we both know people that couldn't kind of do that.
No, look, I mean, don't get me wrong, like I loved being at home in Victoria, purely because, as we sort of spoke about earlier, like my strength was surfing good waves. Like I loved surfing good waves, you know, and which is probably not very smart as a competitor trying to jump through the WQS, you know, trying to jump a WQS hurdle. But we had some great friends that we traveled with, and we had a great time, and sometimes we got good surf, other times we didn't, but it was a lot of fun, and you know, we were lucky, really lucky to be able to do that. You know, you'd come home and you know, some of your friends had been working, you know, or, you know, I think it was just probably about being, you know, understanding that we were very fortunate to have the opportunity to do that. I still think I'm really fortunate to have had the opportunity to do that.
Of course. Did you have a contingency option if the professional surfing thing didn't work out? Were you going to university or working in an apprenticeship or anything?
Not like, look, I finished year 12. I did all my exams. I got into university for primary school teaching. That was what I wanted to kind of pursue if I didn't go down the surfing pathway. And then, yeah, look, sort of one thing led to another, and then coming out of surfing, I had the opportunity to come and work at Surfing Victoria, and my first job at Surfing Victoria was just high performance coaching director, which was great because I got to do things that I loved, which was talk about surfing, and I also got to work with kids who are really passionate about surfing, which I'm really passionate about. So yeah, it was a really, I don't want to say an easy progression, but it was something that I enjoyed. And as I said earlier, I was really lucky to have the people around me in the Surfing Victoria team that kind of, you know, sometimes understood that I just needed to go surfing for a little while.
It's good to be amongst like-minded individuals. Back to your competitive career, I want to get to the top of the mountain here, because I've got two moments, and these might not be the two moments that you want to talk about. There might be a third that should be in contention for the competitive peak for you. 2008, you win the O'Neill Coldwater Classic in Scotland, Thurso, which was, I don't know what it was called at the time, the QS 6000, 10,000 prime, whatever the denotation was at the time. Big deal. I never got to go to that event, but have heard that it is the best event that the sport has ever run for a number of reasons, which you won. And I think as part of the winning package, you get like a sword and a parcel of land and a lordship. So that's pretty cool. And then the following year, I have the 2009 Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach, which we're going to get to in detail in a second. But is there a third contender for the highlights of your competitive career?
Look, to be honest, I don't think I was a great competitor at all. I think a lot of that's probably stems from growing up in a remote area, no board rider club. There was lots of elements that I was shocking at with competitive surfing. So in particular, probably hassling and those types of things, which I'm so happy to see that, and annoyed to see that 4-man priorities come in.
You were ahead of your time, man. What can I say?
I think, look, Scotland was great. That was aside from the winning, you know, side of that event was so amazing. You know, like the scenery, the people of Thurso and that were just so cool. You know, we would go, you know, you go surfing and it would be freezing and it'd be this and that. You get out and there was, you know, there's pubs everywhere. You go and you have a meal, the fires are going. That was just, you know, it was truly an awesome event. O'Neill, like when they were doing those Coldwater Series events, they were like cutting edge. They were mobile. They were, you know, that was, I think we surfed like there was maybe 3 breaks that we surfed for that comp, and they were quite a way apart. I forget the names. Like obviously Thurso, right in the middle of town, that was where the finals day was, but there was another, like a right slab, like 10 minutes drive away. We surfed there. We surfed another break for the round 1, and they had that big, you know, huge, big like military van that they would deck out with everything, and you know that was like cutting edge, because I just think those events were so cool because, you know, surfing is so much about like searching for waves, and you find them and you score. and they were so on board with that, and that was super cool.
It was really smart. I was gonna say it's really smart too of O'Neill, because I remember what you was employed at the ASP at the time too, and so many of the sponsors, and they wanted warm water event here and sort of sell board shorts and bathing suits here and stuff. But O'Neill's DNA was we're wetsuits, so they created this Coldwater Classic series, which had the Scotland event. It had Cape Town, Steamer Lane. I think they had an event in Tasmania. It was just so cool. I'm gonna put it out there. I think they should re-energize that. I think it was really rad.
Yeah, and I think the same. Like, I think, it's like, I sit here, I love the fact that G-Land's back on tour. I love watching those waves. But I also love watching, when it's gritty, I remember, you go to Scotland, and I remember, you'd have boots, gloves, hood, wetties, and everyone was in that same boat where it was rough, and it was fantastic.
Growing up in Victoria and just hearing you talk about your competitive career, doing well in England, like winning in Scotland, like we're going to get to bells in a moment here, but do you feel like you had an advantage just in cold weather events just because of where you grew up?
I think I just liked wearing a wetty.
I think that's part of it, though, right? I think of it too, where it's like, I'm just going to butcher this because it's a baseball example, but pretend it's cricket. Like in baseball, batters warm up with a weight on the bat, right? And so when they get out and actually swing, it's faster. And I always think of that where surfers grow up in cold water. They're, number one, used to wearing a lot of rubber, or neoprene. And also that when they take it off to go surf in board shorts or whatever, it's like it's kind of taking the weight off the bat in a way. And I've just noticed that whether it's surfers from Victoria or the Central Coast of California, they have an extra zip, when they're surfing without the wetsuit, and even when they are, because they're just sort of used to kind of resistance training in a way.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't really notice wetties because I'm in them all the time. I think I just actually felt more comfortable in myself in a wetsuit. Right, nothing to do with extra weight or less or whatever. I think that was one thing I just enjoyed.
That was the armor.
Yeah. But Scotland. Yeah, back to Scotland was fantastic. Probably the best thing about Scotland was that we all won the sword. That we won a swordsmith made sword. That was, I forget all the champions. I think Nathan Hedge, Russell Winter, Adam Melling, Brent Dorrington, Royden, and myself, I think.
That's a pretty good recall, actually. All the champions. I think you're right. That's great.
I think that's it. But I think.
So you have the sword. Where is it?
Yeah. It took months to get back to Australia because I couldn't take it in my luggage, obviously. But
sure.
It's in my office, just maybe 10 meters away. Sometimes when we get big cardboard boxes, we cut them in half for a bit of fun.
How sacred.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to 2009. 2009, you win the Surfing Victoria Trials. Now, I'm going to pause here for a second. I love the local trials, and I think every event, whether it's a CT or a Challenger Series event or a QS event or a Pro Junior, whatever, I think they should absolutely have local trials to get into the main event for a lot of reasons. Number one, it's a great way to work with the community. And then number two, I just think it's so cool if you grow up in that town and all of a sudden, the person that you stood in line at the coffee shop next to is now surfing against a Kelly Slater or something. I think it's so important. Do you have any memories of that year in the trials, who you're surfing against and what it felt like to win? Because I was there, and it especially the way Surfing Victoria run it feels like a major event in and of itself.
Yeah, no, I remember lots of the trials. I probably remember 2008, I was really close to qualifying for the CT. So I remember going in and, training really hard in the off season because I was really disappointed in myself, and I was really angry. So I remember coming into Bells sort of probably having an attitude of, you know, like I felt like I should have been there, and I was bitterly disappointed that I wasn't. So going into the trials, I remember I surfed against Jack Perry in the semis. I think I remember that being a really, like, a tough heat. You know, I remember thinking to myself, I really have to surf well here, because Jack, he's very fit. He surfs Bells really well. And I remember the day, I think it was like 4 to 6 foot in Howland southwesterly, and it was really, wild. And yeah, I remember I surfed against Carl Wright in the final, and I won the final. Carl and Jack both, they won wildcards in years after me, which was great because they're both really great Victorian surfers. Then I remember going into the main round. The funny thing was that year was there was no elimination rounds. That was the year there was a cutoff. There was a cutoff in August, and there was no elimination rounds. So, I got a wild card, went into round one. Round one was elimination. I think like Kelly and, Mick, and I think they might have started in round two. Like for some, I forget.
They did. I know. I remember what you're talking about. It wasn't, so we had a field reduction in 2010 where we went from 48 man events to 36 man events, as well as the mid-year rotation. We had that through 2011. 2009 was when we experimented with, as you pointed out, we got rid of the non-elimination rounds. So all the top seeds got seeded directly into round two, and it was man on man from the start of round one.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that we stopped that after the Bells event because I think there was a small mutiny after that.
I think because I remember, I think myself and Owen were wildcards for that event, and I think Owen beat Dane in round one, I think, and then Owen beat Kelly in round two, and then I beat Chris Davidson. Chris Davidson came off of a really big result at the Gold Coast. And I don't know what happened, but I remember having Chris Davidson turn up and he had a cast on his wrist. And I remember in round one he needed a score, but he couldn't paddle that fast because he had the cast on his wrist. And he had priority. He was trying to get back to sit on me and block me. But he didn't get there. I got a wave and got the score right at the very end. And that was like super, super lucky because I think if he didn't have a cast on his arm, he would have got to me and the heat would have been over. But I actually remember being really disappointed. Like, I didn't surf great in round one for that event, but I remember being disappointed that I didn't surf great, but also, those situations where you almost lose and it creates a different mindset for you moving forward, and that's sort of opened the door to the rest of the event, I suppose.
Yeah, and so in round two, you take on former national teammate Bede Durbridge. Round three, you got Tom Whitaker. The quarterfinals, you have Hawaiian Kakoa Bakalso. Semifinals, you got Freddie Patacia. And then in the finals, you meet up with pre-world champion version of Joel Parkinson, but certainly, longtime favorite to win the world title. So 2009 may have been like peak powers Joel Parkinson.
He just came off winning Snapper that year, and then so that was the year he first hurt his ankle.
It was. I think he won 3 out of the first 5 events or something like that year. Yeah, he had a crazy run.
Yeah, he was pretty unstoppable at that time.
But going back to what we were talking about before, because there's such a strong community of surfers in the state of Victoria, but as we pointed out, few that make it to this level, and you had this incredible run at Bells, just taking out elite level surfers left and right. Couple of things, I guess. Did your psychology change from that opening round heat against Chris Davidson through to the finals? Could you feel both the support from the local community and maybe the pressure to perform as you got closer and closer to the bell? What was your experience like on those days?
Yeah, no, I think probably what I felt was I actually felt a lot of support. But for like one thing, probably a lot of people in my inner circle kind of know about, but a lot of people that in this audience don't know about. I don't think that whole event, I never stepped in the competitors area once. Like I got changed on the beach every day before a heat, between heats. I was on the beach with all of my family and all my friends. As the event wore on, the friend group got bigger and bigger. But yeah, look, I never went in the competitors area. I just stayed on the beach with everyone else. And that worked for me. But yeah, so that I probably had my inner circle of people that we were just together enjoying the moment, and the rest kind of wasn't really getting in. Other than, as I said, I felt the support. I could hear the crowd cheering on waves, which was cool, amazing. But yeah, I never felt like it affected me in a bad way, because I was just kind of, as I said, I was just with my friends on the beach, just getting to surf great waves and getting a jet ski out every time.
Yeah. I mean, I was there. It was palpable from the at least from the administration containers and the competitors there. Everyone was pretty excited. So
yeah,
it was a lot. I got a couple more topics and we got some listener questions, but we're going to take one more quick break to go to word in from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right. So 2008 qualifying series campaign, agonizingly close to qualifying. 2009. This incredible run at the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach, finishing runner-up to Joel Parkinson. Where are you at this point as like a professional surfer? Like, what are you thinking goal-wise? And at what point do you start to ease into this next chapter of your professional life?
Well, at that stage, I was still really motivated to qualify. And then, yeah, it just sort of got to a point where I just was a bit like, I think at the time I was 28 or 29, and I just sort of said, I'd spend a lot of money going to surf waves that are small and beach breaks. I sort of said, I want to spend a bit of time surfing some good ones. So... or, travel into some real good ones where I knew I was going to get barreled and those things. So I just kind of called it, and I was happy to call it. And then, sort of got married not long after that and had kids, and here we are, which is, I'm still doing what I really like to do, which is get to go surfing and live close to the beach and those things. So it was, as I sort of said, the transition wasn't easy. And if it's pumping, I still get annoyed because I want to go surfing if I can't, and those types of things. But it's life's good.
Yeah. We touched on it a little bit, living in Torquay, I'm sure you miss some of the waves from down south, but it sounds like you're on the path to developing your kids to wanting to come down, join you down there and surf waves anyway.
Yeah, through COVID last year, we went down to Portland for about 10 days. We knew I think Torquay was going to get locked down. And
right.
So we went down to Portland we sort of got stuck down there for like 10 or 12 days, and we got some great waves and I was able to take my son surfing. We were able to light fires on the beach and those types of things. And I remember so many times saying, this is what me and, this is what I was saying to my son. I was like, man, this is what me and Papa did. Like, this is what we used to always do. Like, so that was super cool. That was awesome.
At 8, has he? And I guess the last time we would have ran was 2009, so he would have been 5. Has he been to the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach before? And
he has.
So
yeah,
does
he has.
Does he kind of? Does it make an impact?
He doesn't
on
really
him?
remember it. Yeah, he doesn't really remember it. He sort of remembers like some people, like he met Kelly and those types of things, and his like Carissa comes over and sees our family when she comes, and so he remembers those things, and he sort of doesn't really remember the comp that much. Right. But I'm super excited this year because he's sort of old enough. He knows, like, he loves like Griffin Colapinto, and he loves like a couple of the surfers. So yeah, he just, because I remember as a kid, like, you know, you try and get autographs on the beach and things like that. And, like, so I think he'll start to do that, which will be funny. Like, I think maybe I would have been like 9 or 10. I got Tom Curran's autograph on the backtrack at Bells. Like, you know, the backtrack that all the,
yeah.
Like, you don't walk down through the stairs, you walk down the back, like, mud track. I got his autograph there. He was just coming in from a surf, and my dad's like, hey, you should get his autograph. So I'm hoping, like, you know, he'll get, I don't know, hopefully he gets like Griffins or something, you know, because he freaks out on Griffin. So be cool.
That's so cool. It sounds like he's sort of retracing your own footsteps, because you got to go there when you were a kid as well. And as someone who's been so intertwined with the Rip Curl Pro Bells Beach pretty much your entire life, I am interested if you have a surfer or a few surfers that you would put up there in your own personal list of the best to have ever surfed Bells in your experience. Is there anyone that comes to mind, or any few people that come to mind from your perspective where you're like, oh yeah, they're in this small elite level of people?
Yeah, Occy for sure. I think anyone would say Occy's probably arguably the best surfer to surf there. I love watching Matt Hoy surf out there. And like, those two are kind of, you know, they're kind of like Australian favorites, but I always enjoyed watching those guys surf out there. I remember as a kid, I surfed Winky Pop, and I remember Matt Hoy surfing Winky Pop at the same time. And I remember he was riding a channel bottom with a red bottom. And I just always remember how fast he was going. Like, I was sitting at lowers and he was surfing down past me. And I remember just going like, oh my God, like, he was just going so fast. So I remember, you know, Occy, I remember Matt Hoy a lot. Like Kelly, obviously, he was always one that I wanted to watch. Shane Herring was always like a huge favorite, because me and one of my other good friends rode for Insight, same boards as Shane Herring rode. So we would always like watch this movie called The Good Planet and try and watch Shane Herring surf. But there's been lots of great surfers. I think lots of, like, even like Rob Machado used to surf Bells, unbelievable. But I don't know if he ever went very well out there. But him, like Bobby Martinez, was like amazing out there. Obviously Joel, like, I watched Joel sort of competed in the similar age divisions as Joel growing up, and he was always amazing out there. Occy was almost like the fan favorite too. You know, everyone would just swarm to watch his heats, especially when it was good.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent list. It actually takes us into the questions from our Instagram community. So you can follow us at the Lineup Pod. We appreciate everyone that sends in questions. And for you, Adam, we had a lot of questions, but we've narrowed it down to 3. The first question is from Andy Cashford, who asks, what is it about the Bells Beach break that allows only the best to win the comp? And obviously there's that adage that, you know, no kook has ever rung the bell, which I think is pretty true. But I guess, is there something specific about that wave where, you know, really, really the best are the ones who win it?
Yeah, look, I think it's, you know, like, it's similar, you know, when you watch J-Bane, you see surfers like technical glitches at times because it's such a long open face. But, you know, the best technical surfers are able to adapt to the wave face and the changes in the lineup and the changes from Bells Bowl to maybe to Rincon to Winky. I think it's one of those waves that just seems like the technically strong surfers are able to adapt and are suited to the wave because it's of the space on the wave face to execute your maneuvers.
That's a great answer. Next question is from @HarryMoore91. What is your favorite surf spot on the Surf Coast that is not Bells Beach?
No.
Probably have to bleep it out after you say it or something.
No. Look, as I said earlier, I love surfing Winky Pop. It's a super fun wave, and I really like surfing there a lot. That's my son's just starting to be able to surf there now too, so I love it even more. Get to surf it a bit more. But yeah, probably Winky Pop. Just because you take off and you go fast, you go so fast, and you get to use your power on you can come flying into a turn, and that always feels good.
Last question is from Miguel J. Clemente, who asks, what is your favorite thing about being a father? Do you want your kids to compete on the championship tour someday?
Favorite thing about being a dad is you just have a lot of fun, and we just muck around. We just muck around the whole time, really. And do I want my kids to surf on the WSL tour? I would just love the chance to share surfing with my kids, so we can, do it as a family. That's kind of what I remember growing up is, surfing with my dad and, like all that kind of stuff. And that was awesome. I probably, that's probably just an awesome experience you look back on, is just surfing heaps and surfing, all those great surf memories. That's probably a priority. I think all the rest is up to them. If they want to do it, I'll help them or support them. But the rest is, if we can get to some surf trips and surf together, then that's pretty damn good.
I love it. I think that's good timing. I think my kids just walked in the door behind me or something. I heard someone tromping around. So that was it for the Instagram community questions. We're now down to our final segment. This is the lightning round. So these are 10 questions for you to answer as quickly as you can.
All right.
First question. If you could only have one board set up for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
3-fin thruster, 6-channel.
I love it. Specific. Coffee or tea?
I don't drink either.
Burrito or pizza?
Pizza.
Last book you read?
I'm not actually sure. No, I read a book last night. I think it was Harry Potter. Reading a Harry Potter movie book with my son when he goes to bed. He falls asleep about 2 pages in.
I got to get that book off you. Best surf film ever?
Pump or Searching for Tom Curran.
One wave you never have to go back to?
I never have to go back to Newquay. No, I really like Newquay actually. But the place I never liked, I went there twice, was Fernando de Noronha. I went there twice and I caught closeouts for 2 weeks. And I said I'd never go back. But I'd probably go back now. But at the time I was like, oh God, I just flew like halfway around the world and I caught was closeouts all week.
If you only get to surf one wave for the rest of your life, and you can dream cast, it could be no one out, conditions, whatever.
Oh, it's easy. G-Land. Every day of the week, G-Land. I love that place.
Interesting answer. Best person to share a lineup with?
Well, my kids or my dad.
Great answers. Worst person to share a lineup with?
Oh, gee whiz. I don't know how to. Are you supposed to name names, or
you do whatever you like? No, we rarely get names to this question.
Okay. Someone that's like will snake me all the time, but I hate when people paddle underneath me and then like straight to my inside. So someone's doing that ticks me off heaps.
It's a good answer.
But I could name names, but it's probably
that's fine. That's good. Now, you're the CEO now. You got to. Diplomacy is a big part of that. I got it. There wouldn't be anyone from Victoria, I'm sure. Last one. Finish this sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by.
Surfing well into my old age.
I love it. Adam Robertson, thank you so much for your time and your insights. Thank you for everything you've done just to entertain us throughout your competitive career and your free surfing career. And thanks for everything you're doing for the next generation. And yeah, good luck this coming week at Bells with everything, and look forward to catching up soon.
Thanks. Hope to catch up soon, Dave.
Sure.